The conference room felt like a courtroom as I stood at the head of the polished oak table, 23 pairs of eyes fixed on me. The quarterly reports I just presented showed numbers that would make any CEO smile. But I wasn't focused on the applause or the congratulations flowing my way. My attention was locked on one person sitting at the far end of the table, his face drained of color, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped his coffee cup. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Derek Thompson, the man who had once looked me dead in the eye and said I'd never amount to anything in this industry. The same person who had tried to destroy my career before it even began. And now, after 18 months of careful planning and relentless work, he was sitting in my conference room, reporting to me as his new regional vice president. The irony wasn't lost on me that exactly 2 years ago to the day, I had been cleaning out my desk in shame, convinced that maybe he was right. Maybe I really was destined to be nothing more than a junior marketing coordinator who couldn't handle the pressure of real business. But as I watched Derek Adams apple bob nervously while he waited for my feedback on his department's performance, I knew that sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's making sure the person who tried to break you has a front row seat to watch you soar. 2 years earlier, I thought I had landed my dream job at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. The sleek downtown Austin office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lady Bird Lake seemed like the perfect place to launch my career. Fresh out of the University of Texas with a marketing degree and enough ambition to power the entire building, I walked through those glass doors on my first day believing that hard work and dedication would be enough to succeed. Derek Thompson was waiting for me in the lobby that Monday morning, his expensive suit and perfectly styled hair giving him an air of authority that immediately made me straighten my posture. As the senior marketing manager, he would be my direct supervisor, and I was determined to make a great first impression. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced, and his voice carried the kind of confidence that comes from years of corporate success. Samantha Rivera, right? Welcome to Pinnacle. I've reviewed your resume, and while your academic background is impressive, you'll quickly learn that real marketing is nothing like what they teach you in college. His tone was friendly enough, but there was something underneath it that made my stomach tighten. The clients we work with here aren't interested in theory or textbook strategies. They want results, and they want them yesterday. I nodded eagerly, assuring him that I was ready to learn and contribute whatever I could to the team. Derek led me through the open office space, introducing me to various colleagues whose names blurred together in my nervous excitement. The workspace was everything I had imagined a modern marketing agency would be: collaborative spaces with comfortable seating, multiple monitors displaying campaign analytics, and the low hum of creative energy that seemed to pulse through the air. "Your desk is right here," Derek said, gesturing to a small workstation tucked into a corner near the copy machine. The location felt isolated compared to the collaborative clusters where other team members sat, but I told myself it was just temporary. New employees probably started in less desirable spots and earned their way to better positions through good performance. My first week passed in a blur of orientation sessions, policy manuals, and getting familiar with the company's client roster. Pinnacle Marketing Solutions had built an impressive reputation in the Austin business community, working with everyone from local restaurants to major tech startups looking to establish their brand presence. The company culture seemed dynamic and forward-thinking, with casual Fridays, catered lunch meetings, and a ping-pong table in the break room that actually got used. Derek assigned me to work on social media content for smaller clients, explaining that it was important to master the basics before moving on to more complex campaigns. I threw myself into the work with enthusiasm, staying late to perfect posts, researching trending hashtags, and analyzing engagement metrics with the kind of obsessive attention to detail that had earned me Dean's List honors in college. The problems started subtly. Derek would review my work and find fault with elements that seemed arbitrary. The tone wasn't quite right for the brand, the posting schedule needed adjustment, or the visual elements didn't align with some unstated company standard. Each critique came with a patient explanation about how things worked in the real world, always delivered with that same practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "This post about the new coffee shop downtown, Derek said during one of our weekly check-ins, sliding a printed screenshot across his desk. "The copy is too enthusiastic. Our clients want authentic engagement, not cheerleader energy. Professional marketing requires a more sophisticated approach." I studied the post, confused. The coffee shop owner had specifically requested content that conveyed excitement about their grand opening, and the engagement metrics showed it was performing well above average for their account. But Derek was the experienced professional, so I accepted his feedback and revised the content to match his more subdued preference. Similar corrections followed throughout my second month. Campaign concepts that I had researched thoroughly were dismissed as too academic or not grounded in market reality. Client presentations that I had prepared were rewritten by Derek before meetings, often removing elements that I thought were particularly strong. When I asked questions about his changes, he would explain that experience had taught him what worked and what didn't, and that I would understand better once I had been in the industry longer. The breaking point came during my third month, on a rainy Thursday afternoon that I will never forget. I had been working on a comprehensive social media strategy for TechFlow Innovations, a promising startup that was preparing to launch their new project management software. The client had specifically requested fresh ideas that would help them stand out in a crowded market, and I had spent weeks developing a campaign that combined interactive content, influencer partnerships, and targeted advertising in ways that felt innovative and engaging. I was genuinely excited about the presentation. The strategy document was 43 pages of detailed research, creative concepts, and projected outcomes that represented some of my best work. I had practiced my presentation until I could deliver it flawlessly, anticipating potential questions and preparing thoughtful responses that demonstrated my understanding of both the client's needs and the broader market landscape. Derek scheduled the presentation for 2 o'clock in conference room 12B, the glass-walled space that overlooked the bustling office floor. As I set up my laptop and arranged my materials, I felt the familiar flutter of nervous excitement that came with important moments. This presentation felt like my opportunity to prove that I belonged at Pinnacle, that my ideas had value, and that I could contribute meaningfully to the company's success. The TechFlow team arrived right on time. 3 executives in their 30s who carried themselves with the confident energy of entrepreneurs building something they believed in. Derek made the introductions, and I shook hands with Sarah Kim, the CEO, Marcus Rodriguez, the VP of Marketing, and Jennifer Walsh, their head of product development. They seemed genuinely interested in hearing our proposal, and Sarah mentioned that they had heard good things about Pinnacle's innovative approach to digital marketing. I launched into my presentation with confidence, walking them through the market analysis, target audience insights, and creative strategy that formed the foundation of my campaign. The TechFlow executives asked thoughtful questions and seemed engaged with the concepts I was presenting. Sarah nodded approvingly when I explained how the influencer partnership component would help them reach decision-makers in mid-sized companies, and Marcus leaned forward with interest as I detailed the interactive content strategy designed to showcase their software's capabilities. Everything was going perfectly until Derek interrupted me halfway through the creative concepts section. "I think what Samantha is trying to explain," he said, standing up and moving to the front of the room, "is that we've developed a comprehensive approach that leverages proven marketing fundamentals." His tone was smooth and professional, but there was something dismissive in the way he positioned himself between me and the clients. While these ideas show enthusiasm, what really matters is execution based on industry experience. I felt my confidence waver as Derek began reshaping my presentation, explaining the same concepts but framing them as more conservative, traditional approaches. The innovative elements that I had been most proud of were recharacterized as experimental tactics that might be worth testing in small doses. The interactive content strategy became standard social media engagement with some creative elements, and the influencer partnerships were downplayed as typical brand awareness activities. The TechFlow executives listened politely, but I could see their energy shifting. The excitement that had been building during my presentation was replaced by a more reserved attention, as if they were hearing a pitch they had encountered many times before. Sarah asked fewer questions, and when she did, she directed them to Derek rather than to me. By the time Derek finished his reframing of my work, 43 pages of research and creativity had been reduced to what sounded like a generic marketing package that could have been applied to any client in any industry. The TechFlow team thanked us professionally and said they would review the proposal and get back to us within a week. After they left, I remained in the conference room, staring at my laptop screen and trying to process what had just happened. Derek was already packing up his materials, humming quietly to himself as if nothing unusual had occurred. "Derek," I said, finding my voice despite the tightness in my throat. "I don't understand why you changed the presentation." The interactive content strategy was specifically designed to address their need for differentiation, and the metrics I showed demonstrated that similar approaches have been successful for other B2B software companies. He looked up from his briefcase with that familiar patient smile, the one that always appeared when he was about to explain something that I was apparently too inexperienced to understand on my own. "Samantha, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but those clients weren't responding to your approach." I could see it in their body language. They were getting concerned about working with someone who doesn't understand how real businesses operate. "The concepts you presented might work in a college marketing course, but they're not practical for a client who's investing serious money in their launch strategy."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I felt heat rising in my cheeks as I struggled to find the right words to respond. But they seemed engaged when I was presenting the influencer partnership component, and Sarah specifically asked detailed questions about the interactive content calendar. "They were being polite," Derek replied, his tone taking on a slightly sharper edge. "Part of developing professional judgment is learning to read client reactions accurately. When you've been in this industry as long as I have, you develop an instinct for what works and what doesn't." The conversation that followed became increasingly one-sided, as Derek explained all the ways my presentation had missed the mark. According to him, I had misjudged the client's needs, overestimated their appetite for innovative approaches, and failed to present ideas in a way that would build confidence in our agency's capabilities. Each criticism felt like a personal attack on my competence and potential. "The truth is," Derek said, closing his briefcase with a decisive snap, "marketing isn't just about creative ideas. It's about understanding business reality, managing client relationships, and delivering results that impact the bottom line. Those are skills that come from experience, not from textbooks." I gathered my materials in silence, feeling smaller with each passing moment. The excitement and confidence I had felt before the meeting had been completely replaced by doubt and confusion. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe I had misread the client's reactions. Maybe my ideas really were too academic and impractical for real-world application. But the worst part was yet to come. As we walked back toward our desks, Derek stopped in the middle of the open office area. Several colleagues were within earshot, including Lisa Park from the graphics department and Marcus Chen from IT, both of whom I had begun to consider friendly acquaintances during my short time at the company. "Samantha," Derek said, his voice carrying clearly through the workspace, "I think we need to have an honest conversation about your fit with this position. The TechFlow presentation showed me that you're struggling with some fundamental aspects of professional marketing." I felt my face burning as I realized that our private conversation was becoming a public performance. Other team members were beginning to glance in our direction, and I could sense the uncomfortable energy that comes with witnessing someone else's professional humiliation. "I think you need to seriously consider whether this industry is right for you," Derek continued, his tone taking on a quality that sounded almost compassionate but felt deeply condescending. "Marketing requires a specific type of strategic thinking and client management skills that can't be taught in school. Some people have those instincts naturally, and others spend years trying to develop them without success." The office had grown noticeably quieter, and I was acutely aware that my colleagues were listening to every word. Lisa had stopped working entirely and was watching the exchange with obvious discomfort. Marcus was pretending to focus on his computer screen, but I could see his shoulders tense with awkwardness. "Maybe it would be better for everyone if you found a role that's more suited to your background and abilities," Derek said, his voice dropping slightly but still audible to anyone paying attention. "There's no shame in recognizing that some career paths aren't the right fit. It's actually more professional to acknowledge that early rather than continuing to struggle in a position where you can't meet expectations." And then came the words that would echo in my mind for months afterward. "The reality is, Samantha, You'll probably never amount to anything in this industry. It requires a level of business sophistication and strategic thinking that I just don't see in your work. You might be happier in a different field, maybe something in education or nonprofit work where the expectations are different." The silence that followed felt eternal. I stood there in the middle of the office, surrounded by colleagues who were trying desperately to look busy while obviously listening to my professional execution. Derek's words hung in the air like toxic smoke, poisoning everything around them. I managed to mumble something about needing to think about his feedback, then walked to my desk on unsteady legs. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of humiliation and self-doubt. I tried to focus on routine tasks, but my mind kept replaying the presentation and Derek's subsequent criticism. Had I really misread the client so badly? Was my work actually as inadequate as he suggested? The worst part was the way my colleagues treated me for the rest of the day. Some avoided eye contact entirely, while others offered sympathetic smiles that felt more pitying than supportive. The easy camaraderie I had been building with the team had been shattered by one public conversation that positioned me as someone who didn't belong in their professional world. That evening, I sat in my small apartment overlooking South Austin, staring at my reflection in the darkened window and wondering if Derek was right. Maybe I had been naive to think that academic success would translate into professional competence. Maybe the marketing industry really did require something that I simply didn't possess. I called my mom that night, something I rarely did when I was struggling, because I had always prided myself on being independent and capable. But Derek's words had shaken something fundamental in my confidence, and I needed to hear a familiar voice that believed in me. "Misha," she said after I had recounted the day's events, "that man sounds like he's trying to tear you down instead of building you up. Good supervisors help their people succeed. They don't humiliate them in front of their coworkers." Her words were comforting, but they couldn't completely silence the doubt that Derek had planted. What if he was right? What if I really didn't have what it took to succeed in marketing? The next morning, I walked into the office determined to prove Derek wrong. But the atmosphere had changed. Conversations stopped when I approached groups of colleagues, and I caught people whispering in corners with glances in my direction. Word of yesterday's confrontation had apparently spread beyond those who witnessed it directly. Derek treated me with exaggerated patience, speaking slowly and clearly as if I might not understand basic instructions. He assigned me simpler tasks, updating spreadsheets, organizing files, and handling routine administrative work that felt more appropriate for an intern than a college graduate with a marketing degree. "I think it's best if we focus on building your fundamental skills before moving back to client work," he explained during our morning check-in. Sometimes taking a step back allows people to develop a stronger foundation. Over the following weeks, my role at Pinnacle gradually diminished. I was excluded from client meetings, removed from important email chains, and given assignments that felt more like busy work than meaningful contributions to the company's success. Derek's treatment of me became a model that other team members began to follow, and I found myself increasingly isolated within the office culture. The final humiliation came 6 weeks after the TechFlow presentation. Derek called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, closing the door behind us and gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from his desk. His expression was serious but not unkind, like a doctor preparing to deliver bad news to a patient. "Samantha, we need to discuss your future at Pinnacle. Over the past several weeks, it's become clear that this position isn't working out for either of us. Your work quality hasn't improved significantly, and I'm concerned that you're not developing the skills necessary to succeed in our industry." I sat silently, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for the inevitable conclusion. "I've spoken with HR and with Helen Brooks about your situation, and we've agreed that it would be best for you to pursue opportunities elsewhere. We're willing to provide a positive reference regarding your work ethic and attitude, but we can't honestly recommend you for similar positions in marketing." The words felt surreal, like listening to someone else's termination meeting. After 3 months of gradually diminishing responsibilities and increasing isolation, I had known this moment was coming, but the reality of it still felt like a physical blow. "We'll provide 2 weeks of severance pay, and you can take the rest of today to clean out your desk," Derek continued. I want you to know that this isn't personal. Sometimes there's just not a good fit between a person's skills and an industry's requirements. It's better to recognize that now than to continue struggling in a field where you're unlikely to find success. I signed the termination paperwork with numb fingers, barely registering the legal language about confidentiality and severance terms. Derek walked me back to my desk, where a cardboard box was already waiting, a detail that suggested this decision had been made before our conversation even began. Packing my personal belongings took less than 15 minutes. I had never accumulated much at my workspace, and most of what I was taking consisted of school supplies and a few personal photos. The marketing textbooks that I had optimistically brought to reference during projects went into the box along with everything else. As I carried my belongings toward the elevator, I caught glimpses of colleagues watching from their desks. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed relieved that the uncomfortable situation was finally being resolved. Lisa Park gave me a small wave, and Marcus Chen nodded acknowledgement, but no one approached to say goodbye or offer encouragement. The elevator doors closed on my brief career at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, and I descended toward the parking garage with Derek Thompson's words echoing in my mind. You'll probably never amount to anything in this industry. Standing beside my car in the dim underground light, clutching a box of personal items and a letter of termination, I felt the weight of complete professional failure. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe I really wasn't cut out for marketing. Maybe some people just weren't meant to succeed in competitive industries, regardless of their education or effort. But as I drove home through the Austin traffic, something else began stirring beneath the humiliation and self-doubt. It was small at first, barely noticeable among the louder voices of shame and disappointment. But it was there, a tiny spark of anger that Derek Thompson had not just fired me, but had tried to convince me that I was fundamentally incapable of success. That spark would eventually grow into something much larger, though I didn't know it yet. At that moment, all I knew was that Derek Thompson had won, and I was left to figure out what came next for someone who would apparently never amount to anything in marketing. I had no idea that 18 months later, I would be standing in conference room 12B again, but this time as Derek's new boss, watching him squirm as I reviewed his department's disappointing performance metrics. The woman who had been humiliated and dismissed was about to become the person who would decide Derek Thompson's professional future. But that transformation began with one simple decision I made that night. Sitting in my apartment with a termination letter on my kitchen table and Derek's cruel words still ringing in my ears, I decided that maybe, just maybe, he was wrong. The first month after leaving Pinnacle was the darkest period of my professional life. I spent most days in my apartment, alternating between sending out resumes and staring at the ceiling while Derek's words played on repeat in my mind. The severance pay provided a temporary buffer, but the psychological damage felt permanent. Every rejection email from potential employers seemed to confirm what Derek had told me, that I simply wasn't cut out for the marketing industry. My savings account dwindled as I maintained the pretense of actively job searching while secretly wondering if I should start looking at completely different career paths. The education and nonprofit suggestions Derek had made began to seem less like insults and more like realistic assessments of my limited options. Maybe teaching high school business classes wouldn't be so bad. Maybe working for a local charity would provide the kind of meaningful work that didn't require the cutthroat instincts that marketing apparently demanded. The turning point came on a Tuesday morning in November when I was having coffee at Grind Coffee House, a small independent shop near my apartment that had become my default location for job searching away from the suffocating atmosphere of my home. I was scrolling through LinkedIn job postings with diminishing enthusiasm when I overheard a conversation at the table behind me. The whole situation at Pinnacle is just getting worse, a woman's voice said. I heard Derek Thompson pushed out another junior employee last month. That's 4 people in the past year? My fingers froze over my laptop keyboard. I recognized the voice but couldn't immediately place it. It's crazy how Helen Brooks just lets him operate like that, a second voice replied. Everyone knows he's toxic, but his numbers look good on paper, so management pretends not to notice the turnover in his department. The numbers only look good because he takes credit for other people's work, the first voice continued. Remember that campaign for Tech Flow Innovations? Derek presented it as his strategy, but I heard from someone in graphics that it was actually developed by that junior coordinator he fired. Samantha something. The coffee cup slipped from my hand, clattering against the saucer loudly enough to draw annoyed glances from other customers. I turned around slowly, finally recognizing the speakers. Catherine Walsh sat with her back to me, talking to someone I didn't recognize. Kate had worked at Pinnacle for 3 years before leaving abruptly, about 6 months before I was hired. I had heard her name mentioned in passing, but had never met her personally. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing." "I'm Samantha Rivera." Kate turned around, her expression shifting from surprise to something that looked like recognition mixed with sympathy. She was in her early 30s with short auburn hair and the kind of confident bearing that suggested someone who had found her professional footing after some difficult experiences. "Oh my God," she said, standing up immediately. "Please, sit with us. This is Maria Santos. She still works at Pinnacle in the finance department." Maria nodded politely but looked uncomfortable about being caught gossiping about company affairs. "I should probably get back to the office," Maria said, gathering her things. "But Kate, you should definitely tell her about the others." After Maria left, Kate and I sat in awkward silence for a moment. I felt exposed and vulnerable, like someone who had been caught eavesdropping on conversations about their own failure. "How are you doing?" Kate asked, her tone gentle but direct. "I heard about what happened with Derek. It was all over the office gossip network within hours." The question opened floodgates that I hadn't realized were barely contained. For the next hour, I found myself telling Kate everything. The gradual erosion of my confidence, the public humiliation, Derek's cruel assessment of my potential, and the months of self-doubt that had followed. Kate listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of understanding. "Derek Thompson is a predator," Kate said when I finished, "not in a sexual way, but professionally. He identifies people who pose a potential threat to his position and systematically destroys their confidence and reputation before they can challenge him." Her words hit me like cold water. "A threat? I was just a junior coordinator. I wasn't threatening anyone." "You were smart, educated, and enthusiastic," Kate replied. "Your ideas were good. I know because I saw the original TechFlow proposal before Derek butchered it. In a healthy workplace, someone like Derek would have mentored you and helped you develop those ideas into successful campaigns. Instead, he saw you as competition and decided to eliminate you before you could grow into a real challenge." Kate's explanation reframed everything I thought I understood about my experience at Pinnacle. The systematic criticism, the public humiliation, the gradual isolation. It hadn't been about my inadequacy. It had been about Derek's insecurity and his need to maintain control over his department by preventing anyone else from succeeding. "The TechFlow campaign that Derek presented," Kate continued, "it was your work, wasn't it? The interactive content strategy, the influencer partnerships, the targeted approach for B2B software companies?" I nodded, still processing this new perspective on my experience. That campaign generated over $3 million in new business for TechFlow. They've become one of Pinnacle's biggest clients, and Derek has been taking full credit for the strategy that landed them. He's probably going to get promoted to regional manager, based largely on the success of work that you created. The revelation felt like being punched in the stomach. Not only had Derek destroyed my confidence and ended my career at Pinnacle, but he had also stolen my work and was using it to advance his own position. The campaign, I had been told was too academic and impractical, had actually been successful enough to drive millions in revenue. "How do you know all this?" I asked. Kate smiled grimly. "Because Derek Thompson tried to destroy me too, about 2 years ago. I was a mid-level account manager working on some of Pinnacle's biggest clients. I had developed a comprehensive rebranding strategy for Austin Tech Collective that would have been worth about $2 million in billings. Derek convinced Helen Brooks that I was in over my head and that he needed to take over the account to ensure client satisfaction. The pattern was becoming clear. What happened? He presented my strategy as his own, just like he did with your TechFlow work. The rebranding was hugely successful, Austin Tech Collective renewed their contract for 3 years, and Derek got a promotion to senior manager. I got reassigned to smaller accounts and eventually pushed out when I started asking too many questions about the credit for campaigns I had developed. Kate had left Pinnacle 8 months before I was hired, taking a position with a smaller agency, where she was now a partner. But she had maintained relationships with several people still working at Pinnacle, which explained how she knew so much about recent developments. There were others before both of us, Kate continued. Angela Torres, who developed the social media strategy that landed the Restaurant Group account. Marcus Kim, who created the digital marketing approach that Derek still uses for tech startups. Jennifer Walsh, who designed the content marketing framework that became Derek's signature service offering. The list went on. Over the past 4 years, Derek had systematically identified talented employees, stolen their best work, taken credit for their successes, and then found ways to push them out before they could challenge his version of events. It was a pattern of professional theft and psychological manipulation that had been operating under the radar because Derek was careful to target people who were junior enough that their complaints could be dismissed as sour grapes from unsuccessful employees. Why hasn't anyone reported this to HR or to Helen Brooks? I asked. Because Derek is very good at covering his tracks, Kate explained. He never takes credit explicitly. Instead, he positions himself as the senior strategist who, quote, guided the junior employee's development of ideas. When the junior employee gets pushed out, it looks like they couldn't handle the pressure or didn't have the skills to execute their own concepts. Derek comes across as the experienced professional who tried to help them succeed, but ultimately had to protect the client relationship. The conversation with Kate continued for another 2 hours, during which she shared details about Derek's methods that were frighteningly familiar. The gradual undermining of confidence, the public corrections that seemed helpful but were actually humiliating, the systematic exclusion from important meetings and decision-making processes. It was a playbook that Derek had apparently refined over several years of practice. The most insidious part, Kate said, is that he makes his victims believe that their failure is their own fault. He's so good at psychological manipulation that people leave Pinnacle convinced that they really weren't cut out for marketing, just like you did. By the time Kate and I parted ways that afternoon, my understanding of my experience at Pinnacle had been completely transformed. The self-doubt and professional shame that had been consuming me for months began to shift into something else. Anger at being manipulated, determination to understand the full scope of what had happened, and the first flickering of an idea about what I might do with this new knowledge. Kate gave me her business card and encouraged me to stay in touch. If you decide you want to get back into marketing, she said, I might have some freelance opportunities at my agency. But more importantly, you should know that Derek Thompson doesn't get to define your worth or your potential. He's a predator who profits from destroying other people's confidence, and the only way he wins is if his victims never figure out what really happened to them. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a legal pad and began writing down everything I could remember about my experience at Pinnacle. Not the emotional impact or the personal humiliation, but the specific incidents, conversations, and decisions that had shaped my brief career there. For the first time in months, I was approaching my professional failure like a problem to be analyzed rather than a personal inadequacy to be accepted. The pattern that emerged was even clearer on paper than it had been in conversation with Kate. Derek's behavior followed a predictable sequence. Identify a threat, isolate the target, undermine their confidence, steal their work, and then eliminate them while positioning himself as the reasonable professional who had tried to help them succeed. I started researching Derek's background, using LinkedIn and industry publications to understand his career trajectory. What I found was interesting. Derek had been at Pinnacle for 6 years, but his previous positions showed a pattern of relatively short tenures at other agencies. 2 to 3 years seemed to be his typical stay at each company, which suggested that his methods eventually caught up with him and forced him to move on. His LinkedIn profile was carefully crafted to highlight his successes without being too specific about the strategies or campaigns that had generated those results. The language was generic enough that it could apply to anyone's work, which I now realized was probably intentional. Derek had learned to take credit for other people's successes in ways that were difficult to challenge or disprove. But the most revealing information came from industry forums and networking sites, where former colleagues occasionally shared experiences about working with different agencies and managers. I found scattered references to Derek that painted a picture of someone who was politically skilled but professionally questionable. The comments were subtle. Marketing professionals are generally careful about making direct criticisms of colleagues in public forums, but the pattern was unmistakable. Worked with Derek Thompson at Morrison Creative. Great at client relations, but not much collaboration on strategy development. Derek Thompson knows how to manage up, but his team management style is pretty traditional. If you're looking for mentorship and professional development, Derek might not be the best fit. The coded language of professional networking revealed what people couldn't say directly. Derek Thompson was someone who looked good to his superiors while creating problems for his subordinates. Armed with this new understanding, I began reaching out to other former Pinnacle employees who had worked in Derek's department. LinkedIn made it relatively easy to identify people who had left the company during Derek's tenure, and most were willing to have brief conversations once I explained that I was trying to understand industry patterns and career development challenges. The conversations were eye-opening. Angela Torres, who had left Pinnacle about a year before I was hired, confirmed that Derek had taken credit for the restaurant group's social media strategy that had been her idea. She had been pushed out after raising questions about campaign attribution and decision-making processes. Marcus Kim, who had worked at Pinnacle 3 years earlier, described an experience that was nearly identical to mine. He had developed an innovative approach to digital marketing for tech startups, only to watch Derek present it as his own strategy after Marcus was transferred to less important accounts. When Marcus complained to HR about the lack of recognition for his work, he was told that senior team members naturally provided guidance and oversight for junior employee projects, and that collaborative development made it difficult to assign individual credit for successful campaigns. Jennifer Walsh had perhaps the most disturbing story. She had been a promising account manager who developed a content marketing framework that became one of Pinnacle's most successful service offerings. Derek had systematically undermined her relationship with the clients who were using her framework, convincing them that Jennifer lacked the experience to manage their accounts effectively, while positioning himself as the senior strategist who could ensure continuity and quality control. The worst part, Jennifer told me during a phone conversation, wasn't losing the job. It was spending 2 years thinking that I really was incompetent, that I couldn't handle client relationships or manage complex projects. Derek was so good at making me doubt my own abilities that I almost left marketing entirely. Jennifer had eventually found success at a different agency, but it had taken her nearly a year to rebuild the confidence that Derek had systematically destroyed. But beyond the financial and professional benefits, the Nexus position represented something much more significant: the power to shape the competitive environment where Derek Thompson operated. As Regional VP of Marketing, I would be responsible for selecting and managing the agencies that handled marketing for 6 different software companies, with plans to expand that portfolio significantly over the coming months. The irony was almost poetic. Derek Thompson had tried to end my marketing career before it could threaten his position, but his actions had ultimately led to my development into exactly the kind of strategic threat he had feared I might become. Instead of eliminating a potential competitor, he had created an adversary with the resources and authority to directly impact his professional future. I accepted the position at Nexus Technology Group in November, exactly 3 years after Derek had told me I would never amount to anything in the marketing industry. The executive assistant who helped me set up my new office mentioned that Pinnacle Marketing Solutions was among the agencies that Nexus was currently evaluating for potential partnership opportunities. The game was about to reach its final phase, and Derek Thompson was about to discover that the junior coordinator he had humiliated and discarded had grown into someone with the power to determine his professional destiny. My first day as Regional VP of Marketing at Nexus Technology Group began with a comprehensive briefing from Patricia Williams, the Chief Operating Officer, who had been overseeing marketing operations during the search for my predecessor's replacement. Patricia was a no-nonsense executive in her 50s who had built her career managing complex vendor relationships for private equity firms, and she was eager to transfer the marketing portfolio to someone with deeper industry expertise. We currently work with 8 different agencies across our portfolio companies, Patricia explained as we reviewed the vendor management files in my new corner office. The relationships are fragmented, the strategies are inconsistent, and we're probably paying 30% more than we should be because of redundant services and lack of coordination. She handed me a thick folder containing contracts, performance reports, and financial summaries for each agency relationship. The total annual spending on marketing services was $24. The scope of the theft was staggering, but what made it particularly insidious was how Derek had managed to make his victims complicit in their own exploitation. By undermining their confidence and making them question their own abilities, he had prevented them from challenging his version of events or seeking credit for their contributions. The psychological manipulation was as important as the professional theft because it ensured that his victims would be too damaged and demoralized to pose a threat to his reputation. Understanding the full pattern of Derek's behavior was both liberating and infuriating. Liberating because it confirmed that my failure at Pinnacle had nothing to do with my abilities or potential in marketing. Infuriating because it revealed the extent to which I had been manipulated and exploited by someone who had presented himself as a mentor and supervisor. But knowledge without action is just frustration, and I was beginning to realize that I had a choice to make. I could use this understanding to rebuild my confidence and move forward with my career, or I could find a way to hold Derek accountable for his pattern of professional predation. The safe choice would be to focus on my own recovery and future success. The risky choice would be to find a way to expose Derek's methods and prevent him from destroying other people's careers. As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by notes and research about Derek Thompson's systematic exploitation of his subordinates, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of both our careers. I wasn't going to just rebuild my life. I was going to make sure that Derek Thompson faced consequences for the damage he had inflicted on so many promising professionals. The question was how to do it effectively. Derek was skilled at covering his tracks, politically connected within Pinnacle, and positioned in a way that made direct accusations easy to dismiss as complaints from a disgruntled former employee. Any approach would need to be strategic, well-documented, and carefully timed to maximize impact while minimizing the risk of being dismissed or discredited. I started by reaching out to Kate Walsh again, explaining what I had discovered and asking for her advice about potential next steps. Kate was intrigued by the scope of the pattern I had uncovered, but cautioned me about the challenges of exposing someone who was as politically skilled as Derek. The problem is that Derek's victims are scattered across different companies now, and most of them have moved on with their careers, Kate explained during our second coffee meeting. Even if you could convince them to speak up, it would look like a coordinated attack by former employees who couldn't succeed at Pinnacle. Derek would frame it as sour grapes from people who couldn't handle the competitive nature of the marketing industry. Kate was right about the challenges, but she also had some insights about potential vulnerabilities in Derek's position. The key is the client relationships, she said. Derek's value to Pinnacle depends on his ability to maintain and grow the accounts that are supposedly based on his strategic insights. If clients started questioning the source of those strategies, or if his department's performance started declining, Helen Brooks and James Mitchell would have to take a closer look at what's really happening. The conversation with Kate helped me understand that exposing Derek would require more than just documenting his past behavior. I would need to find a way to demonstrate that his methods were ultimately damaging to Pinnacle's long-term success, not just to the individual employees he had exploited. That realization led me to start thinking about the problem from a different angle. Instead of trying to prove what Derek had done to me and others, what if I could show that his approach was fundamentally flawed and unsustainable? What if I could demonstrate that the strategies he had stolen and claimed as his own could be executed more effectively by someone who actually understood their underlying principles? The idea was audacious and would require me to rebuild my career in marketing while simultaneously positioning myself to challenge Derek's professional dominance. It would mean taking significant risks with no guarantee of success, and it would require me to overcome the psychological damage that Derek had inflicted while developing skills and connections that could eventually threaten his position. But as I walked home from my meeting with Kate, I realized that the alternative, accepting Derek's assessment of my potential and walking away from marketing entirely, was actually the riskier choice. Derek Thompson had tried to convince me that I would never amount to anything in the industry, but the evidence I had gathered suggested that his judgment was not just wrong but deliberately destructive. If I was going to prove Derek wrong, I would need to do more than just succeed in marketing. I would need to succeed spectacularly, in ways that directly challenged the foundation of his professional reputation. I would need to become the threat that Derek had tried to eliminate before I even knew I was dangerous. The transformation from victim to adversary wouldn't happen overnight. But as I sat down that evening to plan my next steps, I felt something that had been missing for months: purpose. Derek Thompson had underestimated me once, and that mistake was going to cost him everything he had built on the foundation of other people's work. The game was just beginning, and Derek had no idea that his former victim was about to become his most dangerous opponent. The first step in rebuilding my career came through an unexpected opportunity. Kate Walsh had mentioned that her agency, Meridian Creative, occasionally needed freelance support for overflow projects, and she reached out to me in December with a small assignment that would test my abilities while giving me a chance to rebuild my professional confidence. "It's nothing glamorous," Kate explained during our phone conversation. "A local fitness studio needs a social media content calendar for their January membership drive. The budget is modest, but it would give you a chance to develop something from start to finish without anyone looking over your shoulder or second-guessing your decisions." The project was exactly what I needed. Working alone in my apartment, I threw myself into developing a comprehensive social media strategy for FitCore Austin, a boutique fitness studio that specialized in high-intensity interval training. The owner, Maria Gonzalez, was a former personal trainer who had opened her own studio 2 years earlier and was struggling to compete with larger gym chains and trendy fitness franchises. I spent 3 days researching the local fitness market, analyzing competitor strategies, and developing personas for FitCore's target demographic. The work felt different than it had at Pinnacle. Without Derek's constant criticism and undermining, I was able to trust my instincts and develop ideas without second-guessing every decision. The strategy I created for FitCore focused on authenticity and community building, rather than trying to compete on amenities or pricing. I developed content themes around personal transformation stories, workout tips that members could use at home, and behind-the-scenes glimpses of the supportive community that Maria had built within her studio. The approach was designed to differentiate FitCore from larger competitors by emphasizing the personal relationships and customized attention that only a smaller studio could provide. Maria loved the strategy. More importantly, it worked. Within 6 weeks of implementing the content calendar, FitCore's social media engagement had increased by 300%, and their January membership signups exceeded their goal by 40%. Maria was so pleased with the results that she hired me to develop a comprehensive digital marketing strategy for the entire year. The success with FitCore gave me confidence to pursue additional freelance opportunities. Kate referred me to 2 other small businesses that needed marketing support, and I began building a portfolio of successful campaigns that demonstrated my ability to develop effective strategies for different types of clients and industries. Working as a freelancer was challenging in many ways. The income was unpredictable. I had to handle all aspects of client management myself, and I missed the collaborative energy of working with a team. But it also provided something invaluable: the opportunity to prove to myself that Derek's assessment of my abilities had been completely wrong. Each successful project helped rebuild the confidence that Derek had systematically destroyed. More importantly, I was developing a deep understanding of digital marketing principles and client relationship management that I had never been allowed to build at Pinnacle. Without someone constantly undermining my decisions and taking credit for my work, I was able to see the direct connection between my strategic thinking and client results. By March, I was managing digital marketing for 8 different clients and had established a reputation within Austin's small business community as someone who could deliver results on modest budgets. The work was fulfilling, but I began to realize that freelancing was not going to give me the platform I needed to achieve my larger goal of eventually challenging Derek's position in the industry. The opportunity I had been waiting for came through Marcus Chen, the IT specialist from Pinnacle, who I had reconnected with through mutual contacts in Austin's tech community. Marcus had left Pinnacle 6 months after I was fired, frustrated by the toxic culture in Derek's department, and drawn to a startup that offered equity compensation and the chance to build something from the ground up. "We're looking for someone to lead our marketing efforts," Marcus told me over lunch at a food truck near the startup's offices. in East Austin. It's not a huge company yet, about 15 employees, but we're growing fast and we need someone who can develop our brand strategy and manage our customer acquisition efforts. The company was called Dataflow Solutions, and they had developed software that helped mid-sized businesses analyze and optimize their digital marketing performance. It was exactly the kind of B2B technology company that I had been learning to serve through my freelance work, and the opportunity to join a growing startup was appealing for several reasons. Most importantly, Dataflow Solutions was positioning itself as a competitor to some of the same enterprise software companies that Pinnacle Marketing served as clients. Success at Dataflow would put me in direct contact with the same market segment where Derek had built his reputation, creating opportunities to demonstrate alternative approaches to the strategies he had stolen and claimed as his own. The interview process at Dataflow was unlike anything I had experienced at larger agencies. Instead of formal presentations and corporate protocols, I spent a day working alongside the team, participating in strategy discussions, and collaborating on real client challenges. The CEO, Jennifer Rodriguez, was a former software engineer who had started the company after becoming frustrated with the marketing analytics tools available to her previous employer. "We're not looking for someone who can execute traditional marketing playbooks," Jennifer explained during our final interview. "We need someone who can think creatively about how to reach decision-makers in mid-sized companies who are overwhelmed by marketing technology options, but need better data to make strategic decisions." The challenge was exactly what I had been preparing for. Through months of freelance work with small and medium businesses, I understood the pain points that Dataflow's target customers were experiencing because I had been helping similar companies solve related problems with limited budgets and resources. I accepted the position as marketing director at Dataflow Solutions in April, exactly 1 year after being fired from Pinnacle. The title was more senior than anything I had ever held before, but the team was small enough that I would be responsible for everything from content creation to client relationship management. It was an opportunity to build a marketing department from the ground up, while learning every aspect of B2B software marketing. The first few months at Dataflow were intense, but exhilarating. I was working 60-hour weeks, but every hour was spent on meaningful projects that directly impacted the company's growth. Unlike my experience at Pinnacle, where my contributions had been minimized and eventually stolen, at Dataflow I was able to see the immediate connection between my strategic decisions and business results. I developed a content marketing strategy that positioned Dataflow as thought leaders in marketing analytics, creating white papers and case studies that demonstrated the company's expertise while providing genuine value to potential customers. I designed a lead generation system that used targeted LinkedIn campaigns and industry-specific webinars to reach decision-makers at companies that fit our ideal customer profile. I built relationships with industry publications and conference organizers that resulted in speaking opportunities and media coverage for Dataflow's leadership team. Most importantly, I was developing expertise in the same B2B software marketing niche where Derek had built his reputation at Pinnacle. Every successful campaign I executed at Dataflow was proof that I not only belonged in marketing, but could excel in the specific area where Derek had claimed I would never amount to anything. The breakthrough moment came in August when Dataflow was selected as a finalist for the Austin Business Journal's Startup to Watch Award. The recognition was based largely on our rapid customer acquisition and innovative approach to marketing analytics, and the award ceremony would be attended by executives from most of Austin's major marketing agencies, including Pinnacle. Jennifer asked me to accept the award on behalf of the company and to give a brief presentation about Dataflow's marketing strategy. It would be my first public speaking opportunity since the disastrous TechFlow presentation at Pinnacle, and the prospect of addressing an audience that might include Derek and other Pinnacle employees was both terrifying and exciting. I spent weeks preparing for the presentation, crafting a story about Dataflow's approach to B2B marketing that highlighted the principles I had learned through my freelance work and refined during my time with the startup. The presentation focused on authenticity, data-driven decision-making, and the importance of understanding customer pain points rather than just pushing product features. The night of the awards ceremony, I stood backstage at the Driscoll Hotel ballroom, adjusting my navy blue dress and trying to calm my nerves. The audience included over 200 marketing professionals, business executives, and industry journalists. I had confirmed through mutual contacts that several Pinnacle employees would be attending, though I wasn't sure if Derek would be among them. When my name was called, I walked to the podium with steady steps, drawing on months of rebuilt confidence and professional success. The lights were bright enough that I couldn't clearly see individual faces in the audience, which actually helped me focus on delivering the presentation I had practiced dozens of times. 18 months ago, I began, I thought my career in marketing was over before it had really begun. I had been told by someone I trusted that I would never amount to anything in this industry, that I lacked the business sophistication and strategic thinking necessary to succeed with real clients who were investing serious money in their marketing efforts. The audience was quiet, drawn in by the personal nature of my opening. What I learned through building Dataflow's marketing strategy from the ground up is that the most important skill in B2B marketing isn't the ability to impress clients with sophisticated-sounding strategies. It's the ability to listen carefully to what customers actually need, and then develop solutions that address those specific pain points. I went on to describe Dataflow's approach to customer acquisition, highlighting how we had achieved 400% growth in qualified leads by focusing on educational content and consultative selling rather than traditional advertising and promotional tactics. I shared specific metrics about customer lifetime value, conversion rates, and retention statistics that demonstrated the effectiveness of our strategy. The marketing industry sometimes gets caught up in trends and buzzwords that sound impressive but don't actually drive business results, I continued. At Dataflow, we've learned that sustainable growth comes from understanding your customers better than your competitors do, and then consistently delivering value that exceeds their expectations. The presentation concluded with a case study about how Dataflow had helped a mid-sized manufacturing company increase their marketing ROI by 250% through better data analysis and strategic focus. It was exactly the kind of measurable business impact that B2B executives cared about, and the audience responded with enthusiastic applause. After the ceremony, I was approached by dozens of attendees who wanted to learn more about Dataflow's marketing approach. Several executives from larger companies expressed interest in exploring partnerships or potential client relationships. Industry journalists asked for follow-up interviews about our growth strategy. The networking conversations continued for over 2 hours after the formal program ended. But the most significant interaction came near the end of the evening, when I was gathering my materials and preparing to leave. A familiar voice behind me said, "Congratulations on the award, Samantha. That was quite an impressive presentation." I turned around to find Derek Thompson standing a few feet away, his expression carefully neutral but his body language tense. He was wearing an expensive charcoal suit that I recognized from his LinkedIn photos, and his smile had the same practiced quality that I remembered from our interactions at Pinnacle. "Thank you, Derek," I replied, keeping my voice steady and professional. "I didn't realize you were in the audience tonight." "Pinnacle is always interested in what the local startup community is doing," he said. "We like to stay current with emerging trends and innovative approaches. Your presentation certainly covered some interesting concepts." The conversation was polite, but charged with subtext. Derek was clearly trying to assess how much of a threat I might represent, while I was carefully measuring my words to avoid revealing the full extent of my knowledge about his methods or my intentions regarding his future. "I've heard good things about Pinnacle's recent growth," I said. "The TechFlow account has been particularly successful from what I understand. That interactive content strategy was really innovative." Derek's expression flickered almost imperceptibly at the mention of TechFlow and the specific strategy that he had stolen from me. "We're always developing new approaches for our technology clients," he replied carefully. "The B2B software sector requires constant innovation to stay ahead of market changes." "Absolutely," I agreed. At Dataflow, we've found that the most effective strategies often come from really understanding the specific challenges that each client faces, rather than applying generic frameworks. Every company has unique pain points that require customized solutions. We talked for another few minutes about industry trends and market developments, but the underlying tension was palpable. Derek was trying to gauge whether I represented a competitive threat, while I was gathering intelligence about his current position and priorities at Pinnacle. "Well, congratulations again on the award," Derek said eventually. "I'm sure Dataflow will continue to do well with your leadership." The startup world can be quite exciting, even if it doesn't offer the same stability and resources as more established agencies. The comment was clearly intended to diminish the significance of my success by suggesting that startup achievements were less meaningful than corporate accomplishments. It was exactly the kind of subtle undermining that Derek had used to destroy my confidence at Pinnacle, but now I recognized it for what it was and refused to be affected by it. "Thank you," I replied with a genuine smile. "I've found that working with a smaller team actually provides more opportunities to develop comprehensive skills and see the direct impact of strategic decisions. It's been incredibly rewarding to build something from the ground up." After Derek walked away, I stood alone in the ballroom for a moment, processing the significance of what had just happened. For the first time since leaving Pinnacle, I had faced Derek Thompson as his professional equal rather than as his victim. The interaction had been cordial and surface-level polite, but we both understood that something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. I was no longer the junior coordinator who could be manipulated and discarded. I was now a successful marketing executive, with a growing reputation in the same industry where Derek operated. Most importantly, I had demonstrated expertise in the exact area where Derek had built his career on stolen work, B2B technology marketing. The drive home from the award ceremony felt like crossing a threshold. I had proven to myself and to the Austin marketing community that Derek's assessment of my potential had been completely wrong. But more than that, I had positioned myself to begin the more challenging phase of my plan, systematically undermining Derek's reputation while building my own influence within the industry. The next morning, I received 3 emails from potential clients who had attended the award ceremony, 2 interview requests from industry publications, and an invitation to speak at a digital marketing conference in Dallas. Dataflow's profile was rising rapidly, and my role in that success was becoming widely recognized. But the most interesting development came later that week, when Marcus Chen called me with some unexpected news about changes happening at Pinnacle. "I still have friends there," Marcus said, "and the word is that there's been some tension in Derek's department lately. 2 of his senior account managers left last month, and there are rumors that Helen Brooks is starting to ask questions about turnover rates and team management practices." The information confirmed something I had been hoping for. Derek's methods were finally starting to catch up with him. The pattern of exploiting and discarding talented employees was becoming visible to senior management, especially as Pinnacle's competitors were beginning to poach experienced staff members who were frustrated with the toxic culture in Derek's department. "There's also talk about some client concerns," Marcus continued. "Nothing major yet, but a couple of accounts have been asking more detailed questions about strategy development and team composition. One client specifically requested that their campaigns be managed by someone other than Derek, which apparently caused some awkwardness in the account management meetings. This was exactly the kind of vulnerability I had been waiting for. Derek's value to Pinnacle depended on his ability to maintain client relationships and generate revenue. If clients were beginning to question his capabilities or request alternative account management, his position would become much more precarious. Over the following months, I focused on expanding Dataflow's client base and industry presence while carefully monitoring developments at Pinnacle through my network of contacts within the Austin marketing community. The strategy was working. Dataflow was gaining recognition as an innovative company with superior customer service, while Pinnacle was beginning to experience the long-term consequences of Derek's toxic management style. By December, exactly 2 years after my termination from Pinnacle, I had achieved something that would have seemed impossible during those dark months of self-doubt following Derek's psychological manipulation. I had built a successful career in marketing, developed expertise that was recognized throughout the industry, and positioned myself as a respected leader in the B2B technology sector. But most importantly, I had created the foundation for the final phase of my plan. Derek Thompson had tried to destroy my career before it could threaten his position, but his efforts had ultimately backfired. Instead of eliminating a potential competitor, he had created an adversary who understood his methods, possessed the skills to challenge his dominance, and had the motivation to ensure that he faced consequences for the damage he had inflicted on so many promising professionals. The time had come to move from defense to offense, and Derek Thompson was about to discover that the junior coordinator he had dismissed and discarded had grown into a force that could threaten everything he had built on the foundation of other people's work. The opportunity I had been working toward came in February, when Jennifer Rodriguez announced that Dataflow Solutions had been acquired by Titan Digital Holdings, a major marketing technology company that was aggressively expanding its presence in the Southwest market. The acquisition meant that Dataflow would become the foundation for Titan's new Austin office, with plans to grow from 15 employees to over 100 within 18 months. Jennifer would remain as general manager of the Austin division, while I was promoted to regional marketing director with responsibility for developing Titan's client acquisition strategy across Texas. The position came with a substantial salary increase, equity in the parent company, and most importantly, the resources to compete directly with established agencies like Pinnacle for major corporate accounts. "This is exactly what we've been building toward," Jennifer explained during our transition planning meeting. "Titan wants to establish Austin as their primary growth market, and they're giving us the budget and autonomy to make that happen. We'll be competing for the same enterprise clients that the big agencies have been dominating for years." The promotion put me in a position where I would inevitably encounter Derek professionally, but now I would be meeting him as an equal, rather than as someone seeking employment or trying to rebuild from failure. Titan Digital Holdings was a billion-dollar company with offices in 12 cities, and their Austin expansion represented a significant threat to agencies like Pinnacle that had grown comfortable with limited competition in the regional market. My first major initiative in the new role was developing a comprehensive competitive analysis of Austin's marketing agency landscape. I needed to understand the strengths and weaknesses of potential rivals, identify opportunities for client acquisition, and develop strategies that would differentiate Titan from established players in the market. The research process gave me legitimate reasons to study Pinnacle's recent performance, client roster, and public messaging in detail. What I discovered was fascinating and concerning in equal measure. Pinnacle had continued to grow over the past 2 years, driven largely by the success of campaigns that I now recognized as derivatives of work originally developed by Derek's former subordinates. The TechFlow interactive content strategy that Derek had stolen from me had been refined and applied to at least 6 other technology clients, generating millions in revenue for Pinnacle. The restaurant group social media framework that Angela Torres had created was now marketed as Pinnacle's signature approach to hospitality marketing. The content marketing methodology that Jennifer Walsh had developed was being used to attract B2B clients across multiple industries. But the more closely I examined Pinnacle's recent work, the more I began to notice subtle signs of stagnation. The campaigns that Derek was executing were becoming increasingly formulaic, relying on variations of strategies that had been developed years earlier, rather than true innovation. Without a steady supply of fresh talent to exploit, Derek appeared to be recycling old ideas rather than developing new approaches to meet evolving client needs. This pattern became even more apparent when I started analyzing client retention and satisfaction metrics that were available through industry databases and networking contacts. While Pinnacle was still acquiring new accounts, several long-term clients had quietly moved their business to other agencies over the past year. The official reasons were always diplomatic: budget changes, strategic refocusing, internal restructuring. But conversations with former Pinnacle clients revealed deeper concerns about campaign performance and account management quality. The strategies were solid, but the execution felt stale. One former client told me during a lunch meeting that I had positioned as general market research. It seemed like they were applying the same approaches to every client regardless of our specific needs or market position. We started feeling like we were getting generic solutions rather than customized strategies. Another former client was more direct. Derek Thompson is great at presenting ideas, but when it came to implementation and ongoing optimization, we felt like we were working with someone who didn't really understand the underlying principles of what they were recommending. It was all surface-level insights without the depth we needed for complex campaign management. These conversations confirmed what I had suspected. Derek's stolen strategies worked well initially, but his lack of understanding of their foundational principles made it difficult for him to adapt them effectively or troubleshoot problems when campaigns needed adjustment. He could execute someone else's playbook, but he couldn't innovate or improvise when circumstances required creative solutions. Armed with this intelligence, I began developing Titan's market entry strategy around the specific weaknesses I had identified in Pinnacle's approach. Instead of trying to compete on price or established relationships, we would differentiate ourselves through genuine innovation, deep client collaboration, and the kind of strategic thinking that comes from actually understanding marketing principles rather than just copying successful campaigns. The first test of this approach came when Titan was invited to pitch for the Datatech Solutions account, a fast-growing software company that was looking for an agency to manage their expansion into new geographic markets. Datatech had been working with Pinnacle for 6 months, but they were dissatisfied with the results and open to exploring alternatives. I knew from industry sources that Derek himself would be leading Pinnacle's retention presentation, which meant this would be our first direct competitive encounter since my termination 2 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me that we would be competing for a B2B technology account using strategies derived from the very work Derek had stolen from me at the beginning of my career. The pitch preparation process at Titan was collaborative and thorough in ways that reminded me why I had been drawn to marketing in the first place. Jennifer assembled a team of strategists, analysts, and creative professionals who spent weeks developing a comprehensive understanding of Datatech's business model, competitive landscape, and growth objectives. We conducted extensive interviews with Datatech's leadership team, analyzed their current campaign performance, and researched their target markets with the kind of attention to detail that had been missing from my experience at Pinnacle. The strategy we developed was built around Datatech's specific challenges, rather than generic best practices. We identified 3 key problems with their current marketing approach. Their messaging was too focused on product features rather than customer benefits. Their lead generation tactics were reaching the wrong decision-makers within target companies, and their content marketing lacked the industry credibility necessary to compete with more established software providers. Our proposed solution addressed each of these issues through interconnected tactical approaches that would work together to create a comprehensive competitive advantage. The messaging strategy focused on ROI and business outcomes that resonated with C-level executives, rather than technical specifications that appealed to IT managers. The lead generation system used account-based marketing principles to identify and reach the specific individuals who had budget authority for software purchases. The content marketing program positioned Datatech's leadership team as thought leaders through speaking opportunities, industry publications, and strategic partnerships with respected business organizations. Most importantly, every element of our strategy was designed to be measurable and optimizable, based on real performance data rather than assumptions or industry generalizations. We presented detailed plans for tracking campaign effectiveness, analyzing customer acquisition costs, and continuously improving our approach based on what we learned from market response. The pitch meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning at Datatech's offices in the Domain, Austin's upscale business district. I arrived 30 minutes early to set up our presentation materials and prepare for what I knew would be a defining moment in my professional relationship with Derek Thompson. Derek and his team from Pinnacle arrived exactly on time, and I watched through the conference room windows as they organized their materials in the lobby. Derek looked confident and polished, wearing the same type of expensive suit that had intimidated me during my early days as his subordinate. His presentation materials were professionally bound and impressive looking, and his team moved with the practiced efficiency of people who had delivered dozens of similar pitches. But as I observed Derek's preparation routine, I noticed something that might have been invisible to someone who hadn't worked closely with him before. His confidence appeared performative rather than genuine, and his interactions with his team seemed more directive than collaborative. He was clearly positioned as the senior expert who would deliver the key messages, while his colleagues were there primarily to provide supporting information and handle logistical details. The Datatech leadership team included CEO Michael Harrison, VP of Marketing Lisa Chen, and Chief Revenue Officer David Park. All 3 had been involved in our preliminary discussions, and I had developed a good understanding of their priorities and concerns through those conversations. Pinnacle presented first, and Derek's approach was exactly what I had expected, based on my knowledge of his methods. He opened with an impressive overview of Pinnacle's experience and client roster, emphasizing their established reputation and proven track record in the B2B technology sector. The presentation was polished and professional, featuring case studies from successful campaigns and testimonials from satisfied clients. But as Derek moved into the strategic recommendations, I began to recognize elements that had been lifted from various campaigns developed by his former subordinates. The content marketing framework was a variation of Jennifer Walsh's methodology. The lead generation approach, incorporated tactics from the system that Marcus Kim had designed for tech startups. The messaging strategy borrowed concepts from the positioning work that Angela Torres had created for restaurant clients, adapted somewhat awkwardly for the software industry. The individual components were solid. They had been effective when originally developed by talented strategists who understood their underlying principles. But Derek's presentation lacked the cohesive vision that comes from actually understanding how different tactical elements work together to achieve strategic objectives. It felt like a collection of successful ideas rather than an integrated approach designed specifically for Datatech's unique situation. More problematically, Derek's recommendations were based on generic assumptions about B2B software marketing, rather than insights derived from Datatech's specific challenges and opportunities. When Lisa Chen asked detailed questions about implementation timelines and optimization strategies, Derek's answers were vague and theoretical, rather than concrete and actionable. These approaches have been successful for similar clients in the technology sector, Derek said in response to a question about how the content marketing program would be customized for Datatech's target audience. We have proven methodologies that can be adapted to your specific needs as we develop a deeper understanding of your market position. The response was technically accurate but revealed the fundamental flaw in Derek's approach. He was proposing to apply existing methodologies rather than developing customized solutions. It was exactly the kind of generic thinking that had frustrated Datatech about their current marketing efforts. When it was Titan's turn to present, I opened with a direct acknowledgement of the challenge that Datatech was facing. Based on our conversations over the past month, it's clear that Datatech doesn't need another agency that will apply standard B2B marketing tactics to your business. You need a partner who understands that your growth objectives require innovative approaches that are specifically designed for your competitive landscape and target market dynamics. I went on to present our analysis of Datatech's current marketing challenges, demonstrating that we had invested significant time in understanding their business before proposing solutions. The presentation included detailed research about their competitors' marketing strategies, analysis of their target customers' buying behaviors, and identification of specific opportunities that were not being addressed by their current approach. The problem with most B2B marketing today, I explained, is that agencies tend to recycle successful strategies from previous clients, rather than developing fresh approaches based on each company's unique value proposition and market position. Datatech has distinctive advantages that aren't being leveraged effectively because your current marketing treats you like a generic software company rather than the innovative leader that you actually are. Our strategic recommendations were presented as interconnected solutions to specific problems rather than generic best practices that might or might not be relevant. Each tactical element was linked to measurable business outcomes, and we provided detailed timelines for implementation and optimization based on Datatech's internal capacity and budget constraints. Most importantly, our approach was designed to be evolutionary rather than static. Instead of proposing a fixed strategy that would be executed unchanged for months, we presented a framework for continuous improvement based on market feedback and performance data. The goal was to create a marketing system that would become more effective over time as we learned more about what resonated with Datatech's target customers. The questions that followed our presentation were substantive and detailed, covering implementation logistics, budget allocation, performance measurement, and long-term strategic planning. Unlike Derek's generic responses, I was able to provide specific answers based on our thorough preparation and genuine understanding of Datatech's business objectives. How would you handle the lead qualification process differently than our current approach? David Park asked. Your current system is generating a high volume of leads, but the conversion rate suggests that many of them aren't qualified prospects, I replied. We would implement a more sophisticated scoring methodology that evaluates leads based on multiple criteria including company size, technology budget, decision-making timeline, and current solution satisfaction. This would allow your sales team to focus their time on prospects who are most likely to convert while nurturing longer-term opportunities through automated sequences. The level of detail and specificity in our responses clearly impressed the Datatech team. They asked follow-up questions that demonstrated genuine interest in our approach, and the conversation evolved into a collaborative discussion about implementation strategies rather than a formal presentation format. After both agencies had presented, Michael Harrison explained that Datatech would make their decision within a week and notify both teams by the following Friday. The handshakes and polite farewells were cordial, but I could sense the competitive tension beneath the professional courtesy. Derek approached me in the parking lot after the meeting. His expression carefully neutral, but his body language slightly more tense than it had been during our previous encounter at the awards ceremony. "Quite an impressive presentation, Samantha," he said. "Titan is certainly making a serious investment in the Austin market. Competition is always good for the industry." "Thank you, Derek. Pinnacle's presentation was very polished as well. You clearly have a lot of experience with technology clients." The conversation was polite, but loaded with subtext. We both understood that this had been more than just a routine competitive pitch. It was a direct test of our respective approaches to B2B marketing, with significant implications for our future professional relationship. "I'm curious," Derek continued, "how Titan plans to scale their approach when they start working with larger client portfolios. The level of customization you described seems resource-intensive. Most successful agencies eventually develop standardized methodologies that can be applied efficiently across multiple accounts." It was a subtle challenge to the sustainability of our client-specific approach, and I recognized the underlying suggestion that our strategy was impractical for larger-scale operations. Derek was positioning Titan's thoroughness as a weakness rather than a strength. "We found that the initial investment in understanding each client's unique situation actually makes the ongoing account management more efficient," I replied. "When you really understand a client's business model and competitive landscape, you can make strategic adjustments quickly, rather than constantly testing generic approaches to see what works." The exchange continued for a few more minutes, but both of us were clearly eager to move on to other priorities. As Derek walked toward his car, I realized that regardless of who won the DataTech account, something fundamental had shifted in our professional relationship. We were no longer supervisor and subordinate, or even established executive and emerging competitor. We were now direct rivals competing for the same opportunities with very different approaches to client service and strategic development. The call from Michael Harrison came the following Wednesday afternoon. DataTech had chosen to move their account to Titan Digital Holdings, citing our superior understanding of their business objectives and more innovative approach to market development. The contract was worth $2.8 million annually, making it the largest account win in Titan Austin's brief history. But beyond the financial significance, winning the DataTech account represented something much more important. Proof that my approach to marketing was not only viable but superior to Derek's method of recycling stolen strategies. In a direct competitive situation, genuine strategic thinking had defeated borrowed tactics. The news of Titan's client win spread quickly through Austin's marketing community, and I began receiving congratulatory messages from colleagues throughout the industry. Several mentioned that they had heard Pinnacle was reassessing their approach to technology clients following the DataTech loss, which suggested that Derek was facing internal pressure about his department's competitive performance. More client opportunities followed throughout the spring and summer. 3 additional companies moved their accounts from established agencies to Titan, attracted by our reputation for innovative thinking and measurable results. By September, Titan Austin had grown to 42 employees and was consistently winning competitive pitches against agencies that had dominated the market for years. The success was professionally fulfilling, but it also served a deeper purpose. Each client win demonstrated that Derek's assessment of my capabilities had been not just wrong, but spectacularly wrong. The person he had claimed would never amount to anything in marketing was now leading an agency that was systematically outcompeting his department for major accounts. But the most significant development came in October, when I received a call from Helena Morrison, a recruiter who specialized in senior marketing positions at technology companies. "I have a client who's looking for a regional vice president of marketing," Helena explained. "It's a major opportunity with a well-established company that's expanding their operations in Texas. The position would involve managing multiple agency relationships and overseeing marketing strategy for a portfolio of B2B software companies. The client," Helena revealed after I expressed interest, was Nexus Technology Group, a private equity firm that owned 6 different software companies and was planning to acquire several more over the next 18 months. They needed someone with demonstrated expertise in B2B marketing to lead their portfolio companies' growth initiatives and manage relationships with external agencies. The position was exactly the kind of senior executive role that would put me in a position to influence major marketing decisions across multiple companies. More intriguingly, Helena mentioned that Nexus was currently evaluating their existing agency relationships and considering consolidating their marketing services with fewer providers to achieve better coordination and cost efficiency. They're looking for someone who can think strategically about agency selection and management, Helena explained. The right candidate would have significant input into which agencies they work with going forward. I accepted the interview opportunity immediately, recognizing that this position could provide the platform I needed for the final phase of my plan. As Regional VP of Marketing for Nexus Technology Group, I would have the authority to make decisions about agency partnerships worth tens of millions of dollars annually. Those decisions would significantly impact the competitive landscape in Austin's marketing industry. The interview process with Nexus was comprehensive and rigorous, involving multiple rounds of conversations with portfolio company executives, presentations to the investment committee, and detailed discussions about strategic planning and vendor management. Throughout the process, I was careful to present myself as someone focused on achieving business results, rather than settling personal scores. But I made sure to emphasize my expertise in evaluating agency capabilities and identifying strategic partnerships that would drive sustainable growth. The job offer came 3 weeks later, along with a compensation package that included base salary, performance bonuses, and equity participation in Nexus portfolio companies. The total package was more than double what I had been earning at Titan, and the position came with an executive assistant, a travel budget, and the kind of corporate resources that I had never imagined having access to during my early career struggles. But beyond the financial and professional benefits, the Nexus position represented something much more significant: the power to shape the competitive environment where Derek Thompson operated. As Regional VP of Marketing, I would be responsible for selecting and managing the agencies that handled marketing for 6 different software companies, with plans to expand that portfolio significantly over the coming months. The irony was almost poetic. Derek Thompson had tried to end my marketing career before it could threaten his position, but his actions had ultimately led to my development into exactly the kind of strategic threat he had feared I might become. Instead of eliminating a potential competitor, he had created an adversary with the resources and authority to directly impact his professional future. I accepted the position at Nexus Technology Group in November, exactly 3 years after Derek had told me I would never amount to anything in the marketing industry. The executive assistant who helped me set up my new office mentioned that Pinnacle Marketing Solutions was among the agencies that Nexus was currently evaluating for potential partnership opportunities. The game was about to reach its final phase, and Derek Thompson was about to discover that the junior coordinator he had humiliated and discarded had grown into someone with the power to determine his professional destiny. My first day as Regional VP of Marketing at Nexus Technology Group began with a comprehensive briefing from Patricia Williams, the Chief Operating Officer, who had been overseeing marketing operations during the search for my predecessor's replacement. Patricia was a no-nonsense executive in her 50s who had built her career managing complex vendor relationships for private equity firms, and she was eager to transfer the marketing portfolio to someone with deeper industry expertise. We currently work with 8 different agencies across our portfolio companies, Patricia explained as we reviewed the vendor management files in my new corner office. The relationships are fragmented, the strategies are inconsistent, and we're probably paying 30% more than we should be because of redundant services and lack of coordination. She handed me a thick folder containing contracts, performance reports, and financial summaries for each agency relationship. The total annual spending on marketing services was $24.7 million across 6 software companies, with additional budget allocated for 3 acquisitions that were expected to close within the next 6 months. Your primary mandate is to rationalize these relationships, Patricia continued. We want to work with fewer agencies that can provide integrated services across multiple portfolio companies. The goal is better coordination, improved performance, and significant cost savings through consolidated purchasing power. I spent my first week reviewing the existing agency relationships, analyzing campaign performance data, and meeting with marketing executives from each portfolio company to understand their current challenges and objectives. The process confirmed what Patricia had suggested. Nexus was working with too many vendors, paying premium rates for services that could be delivered more efficiently through consolidated partnerships. But the most interesting discovery came when I reviewed the list of agencies that had submitted proposals for the Consolidated Marketing Services contract. Pinnacle Marketing Solutions was among the 8 firms competing for what would potentially be their largest client relationship ever. Derek Thompson was listed as the primary contact for Pinnacle's proposal, and the submission included case studies featuring several campaigns that I recognized as derivatives of work originally developed by his former subordinates. The TechFlow interactive content strategy was prominently featured, presented as evidence of Derek's innovative approach to B2B technology marketing. The evaluation process for the Consolidated Marketing contract was scheduled to take 6 weeks, with initial presentations followed by detailed capability assessments and final negotiations with preferred vendors. As Regional VP of Marketing, I would lead the evaluation committee and have final authority over agency selection, subject to executive approval from Patricia and the investment committee. The competitive presentations were scheduled for 3 consecutive days in December, with each agency allocated 2 hours to demonstrate their capabilities and present strategic recommendations for managing Nexus's diverse portfolio of software companies. Pinnacle was scheduled for the second day, and Derek had confirmed that he would personally lead their presentation. I spent considerable time preparing for the evaluation process, developing assessment criteria that would fairly measure each agency's strategic thinking, execution capabilities, and cultural fit with Nexus's performance-driven environment. The scoring system I created emphasized measurable business outcomes, innovative approaches to complex challenges, and demonstrated ability to collaborate effectively with client teams. But I also made sure to include evaluation criteria that would highlight the specific weaknesses I had observed in Derek's approach over the years. Questions about strategic adaptability, campaign optimization methodologies, and client communication practices were designed to reveal whether agencies truly understood the underlying principles of effective marketing, or were simply applying generic templates to different situations. The first day of presentations went smoothly, with 2 smaller agencies delivering competent but unremarkable pitches that demonstrated technical proficiency without offering compelling strategic insights. Both agencies focused heavily on their existing client rosters and past campaign successes, but neither presented innovative approaches that would differentiate Nexus's portfolio companies in competitive markets. Derek arrived at Nexus headquarters 30 minutes before his scheduled presentation time, accompanied by Helen Brooks and 2 senior account managers who I recognized from industry networking events. Derek was impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit that projected executive authority, and his materials were professionally organized in leather portfolios that reinforced Pinnacle's established reputation and corporate sophistication. I greeted Derek and his team in the lobby, maintaining professional courtesy while internally noting how different our interaction felt compared to our previous encounters. This time, Derek was the one seeking approval and trying to make a favorable impression, while I held the decision-making authority that would determine whether Pinnacle won or lost the largest contract opportunity in their company's history. "Samantha, congratulations on the new position," Derek said as we shook hands. "Nexus has built an impressive portfolio of companies. We're excited about the opportunity to contribute to their continued growth." "Thank you, Derek. We're looking forward to seeing how Pinnacle's approach would work across such a diverse range of software businesses. The portfolio companies have quite different target markets and competitive challenges." The presentation took place in Nexus's main conference room, a glass-walled space that overlooked downtown Austin and provided an appropriately executive setting for high-stakes business discussions. The evaluation committee included myself, Patricia Williams, and 3 marketing executives from Nexus portfolio companies who would be directly affected by the agency selection decision. Derek opened with a polished overview of Pinnacle's history, client roster, and service capabilities. The presentation was visually impressive and professionally delivered, emphasizing Pinnacle's established reputation and proven track record in the B2B technology sector. Derek positioned Pinnacle as the safe choice for a sophisticated client like Nexus, highlighting their experience with complex campaigns and long-term client relationships. "At Pinnacle, we understand that private equity portfolio companies require marketing partners who can think strategically about growth acceleration and value creation," Derek said, clicking through slides that featured testimonials from satisfied clients and performance metrics from successful campaigns. Our approach is built on proven methodologies that have generated measurable results for technology companies at various stages of development. As Derek moved into the strategic recommendations section of his presentation, I began recognizing elements that had been adapted from various campaigns developed by his former subordinates. The content marketing framework was a sophisticated version of Jennifer Walsh's original methodology. The lead generation system incorporated advanced versions of tactics that Marcus Kim had designed for startup clients. The customer retention strategies borrowed concepts from Angela Torres's relationship marketing approaches. But while the individual components were solid, Derek's presentation suffered from the same fundamental weakness that had always characterized his work: a lack of genuine understanding of how different tactical elements work together to achieve strategic objectives. His recommendations felt like a collection of successful ideas, rather than an integrated approach designed specifically for Nexus's unique situation. These methodologies have been successful for similar clients in the technology sector, Derek explained when asked about customization for different portfolio companies. We have proven frameworks that can be adapted to specific market conditions and competitive landscapes as we develop deeper insights into each company's positioning. The response was professionally delivered but revealed exactly what I had expected. Derek was proposing to apply existing templates rather than developing customized solutions based on each portfolio company's unique challenges and opportunities. Patricia Williams asked several detailed questions about implementation timelines, resource allocation, and performance measurement. Derek's answers were generally competent, but lacked the specificity that would demonstrate deep preparation and genuine understanding of Nexus's business objectives. How would you handle the coordination challenges of managing campaigns for 6 different companies with overlapping target markets? Patricia asked. We would implement a centralized strategy development process that ensures consistency across portfolio companies while allowing for tactical customization based on specific market conditions, Derek replied. Our account management structure is designed to facilitate coordination while maintaining focused attention on each client's individual needs. The answer was technically accurate but generic enough that it could have applied to almost any client situation. It demonstrated Derek's ability to sound knowledgeable without actually committing to specific approaches or measurable outcomes. When it was time for questions from the portfolio company marketing executives, Derek faced more challenging inquiries about strategic innovation and campaign optimization. His responses revealed the limitations of his approach more clearly than I had expected. What's your philosophy on testing new marketing channels versus optimizing existing campaigns? Asked Robert Chen, the VP of Marketing for CloudSync Solutions. We believe in balancing innovation with proven performance, Derek said. While it's important to explore new opportunities, our primary focus is on maximizing ROI through channels and tactics that have demonstrated effectiveness for similar businesses. The answer reinforced the impression that Derek preferred safe, conventional approaches over genuine innovation. It was exactly the kind of risk-averse thinking that led to stagnation in competitive markets, where breakthrough results required creative strategies. After Derek's team finished their presentation and left the building, I convened a brief evaluation session with the committee members to capture their initial impressions before the remaining presentations influenced their assessments. Pinnacle is clearly experienced and professional, Patricia observed, but I didn't hear much that would differentiate our portfolio companies from their competitors. The strategies seemed fairly conventional for the technology sector. Robert Chen was more direct. They talked a lot about proven methodologies and established frameworks, but I didn't see evidence of innovative thinking or customized solutions. For the money they're asking, I would expect more strategic creativity. The feedback confirmed my own assessment of Derek's presentation. Pinnacle had demonstrated competence but not excellence, experience but not innovation, professionalism but not strategic insight. It was exactly the kind of performance I had expected from someone who had built his reputation on borrowed ideas rather than genuine expertise. The remaining agencies presented over the following 2 days, and 2 of them delivered significantly more impressive demonstrations of strategic thinking and creative problem-solving. Matrix Digital presented a comprehensive approach to account-based marketing that was specifically designed for Nexus's competitive situation. Catalyst Marketing demonstrated innovative uses of marketing automation and predictive analytics that could provide genuine competitive advantages for the portfolio companies. Both agencies had clearly invested significant time in understanding Nexus's business model and developing customized recommendations rather than adapting generic frameworks. Their presentations included detailed research about each portfolio company's market position, competitive landscape, and growth opportunities. Most importantly, their strategic recommendations were supported by specific implementation plans and measurable performance metrics that would allow for continuous optimization based on market results. The evaluation process concluded with a comprehensive scoring assessment that measured each agency across 12 different criteria, including strategic thinking, creative innovation, technical capabilities, client communication, cultural fit, and cost efficiency. The scoring was conducted independently by each committee member to ensure objectivity and avoid groupthink bias. When I compiled the final scores, the results were decisive but not surprising. Matrix Digital received the highest overall rating, followed closely by Catalyst Marketing. Pinnacle ranked 5th out of 8 agencies, with particularly low scores in the areas of strategic innovation and customized solutions development. Derek's presentation had been professionally competent, but ultimately unremarkable. In a competitive evaluation process that emphasized strategic thinking and innovative approaches, his reliance on conventional wisdom and generic frameworks had been exposed as inadequate for a sophisticated client with complex requirements. The final vendor selection meeting took place the following week, with Patricia Williams and the investment committee reviewing the evaluation results and discussing recommendations for the consolidated marketing contract. I presented the scoring summary and strategic rationale for selecting Matrix Digital as the primary agency partner, with Catalyst Marketing designated as a secondary vendor for specialized projects and competitive backup. "What about Pinnacle?" Patricia asked. "They have a strong reputation in the Austin market and significant experience with technology clients." "Pinnacle demonstrated professional competence," I replied carefully, "but their approach was conventional rather than innovative. For a portfolio of companies that need to differentiate themselves in competitive markets, we require agency partners who can think creatively about strategic challenges rather than applying generic frameworks." The investment committee approved my recommendations unanimously, and I was authorized to begin contract negotiations with Matrix Digital and Catalyst Marketing. The combined value of the contracts would be approximately $18 million annually, representing one of the largest agency partnerships in the Austin market. But before finalizing the new relationships, I had to communicate the selection results to all participating agencies, including delivering the rejection notification to Derek and his team at Pinnacle. I scheduled individual phone calls with each agency to provide feedback on their presentations and explain the selection rationale. The conversations with unsuccessful agencies were professionally cordial, but necessarily disappointing for firms that had invested significant time and resources in the competitive process. Derek's call was scheduled for Friday afternoon, exactly 4 years after he had terminated my employment at Pinnacle, with his cruel prediction about my future in the marketing industry. The symmetry wasn't lost on me as I prepared to deliver news that would significantly impact his department's revenue and growth prospects. "Hello, Derek. Thank you for taking the time to participate in our evaluation process," I began when he answered the phone. I wanted to personally communicate our decision and provide some feedback on Pinnacle's presentation. "Of course, Samantha. We're eager to hear the results." After careful consideration by our evaluation committee, we've decided to move forward with other agency partners for the consolidated marketing contract. While Pinnacle demonstrated professional competence and industry experience, we ultimately selected agencies that offered more innovative approaches to the strategic challenges facing our portfolio companies. The silence that followed lasted several seconds longer than would be comfortable in normal business conversation. When Derek finally responded, his voice carried a tone that I had never heard from him before, uncertainty mixed with barely controlled frustration. "I see. Could you provide more specific feedback about areas where our presentation could have been stronger?" "Certainly." The committee felt that Pinnacle's recommendations relied heavily on conventional industry practices, rather than customized solutions designed specifically for our portfolio company's unique market positions. We were looking for more evidence of strategic innovation and creative problem-solving. I continued with detailed feedback about the presentation, highlighting specific areas where Derek's approach had fallen short of the committee's expectations. The conversation was professional and constructive, but I could sense Derek's growing realization that he had lost a potentially transformative contract opportunity. The evaluation process was very competitive, I concluded, and we had to make difficult decisions among several qualified agencies. We certainly respect Pinnacle's capabilities and wish you continued success with other client opportunities. After ending the call, I sat in my office overlooking downtown Austin, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 4 years earlier, Derek Thompson had used his position of authority to destroy my confidence and end my career at Pinnacle, telling me that I would never amount to anything in the marketing industry. Today, I had used my position of authority to reject Derek's agency for a contract that would have represented the largest client relationship in Pinnacle's history. But the satisfaction wasn't about revenge or personal vindication. It was about the validation of everything I had learned about genuine strategic thinking versus borrowed tactics, authentic leadership versus manipulative control, and collaborative innovation versus exploitative competition. Derek had built his career on a foundation of stolen work and psychological manipulation, creating short-term success at the expense of long-term sustainability. His methods had eventually caught up with him in a competitive situation that required genuine expertise rather than recycled strategies. The news of Nexus's agency selection spread quickly through Austin's marketing community, with industry publications reporting on the competitive process and the significant contract values involved. Matrix Digital and Catalyst Marketing gained immediate credibility from winning such a prestigious client, while Pinnacle faced questions about their ability to compete for major enterprise accounts. More significantly for Derek personally, Pinnacle's failure to win the Nexus contract became a catalyst for broader organizational changes within the agency. Helen Brooks announced her departure 6 weeks later to join a larger firm in Dallas, and James Mitchell hired an external consultant to review Pinnacle's competitive positioning and client acquisition strategies. The consultant's report, which I heard about through industry contacts, identified several areas of concern, including overdependence on conventional marketing approaches, limited innovation in service offerings, and challenges with client retention in competitive account situations. The report recommended significant changes in strategic planning, creative development, and account management practices. Derek survived the organizational restructuring, but was reassigned from his senior management role to a client services position with reduced authority and compensation. His department was reorganized under new leadership, and several of his longtime clients were transferred to other account managers as part of the operational improvements. 6 months later, Derek left Pinnacle to join a smaller agency in San Antonio, taking a position that represented a significant step backward in terms of responsibility and industry influence. The move was positioned as a lifestyle choice, but industry observers understood it as the result of limited opportunities in Austin following his diminished reputation. Meanwhile, my work at Nexus Technology Group continued to thrive. The consolidated marketing program exceeded performance targets in its first year, generating significant cost savings while improving campaign effectiveness across all portfolio companies. The success led to expanded responsibilities and recognition within the private equity industry as an innovative leader in marketing strategy and vendor management. But the most meaningful validation came from the portfolio company executives who had worked with our new agency partners. The collaborative approach and customized strategies that Matrix Digital and Catalyst Marketing provided were generating measurable business results and genuine competitive advantages that conventional marketing frameworks could never have achieved. The transformation was complete. The junior coordinator who Derek Thompson had dismissed as lacking business sophistication had grown into a senior executive with the authority to shape million-dollar marketing decisions. The person he had claimed would never amount to anything in the industry was now recognized as a strategic leader whose decisions influenced the competitive landscape where Derek himself operated. But beyond the professional satisfaction, the experience had taught me something important about resilience, authenticity, and the power of genuine expertise over borrowed tactics. Derek's attempt to destroy my career had ultimately failed because he had underestimated the foundation of real competence and ethical leadership that couldn't be undermined by manipulation or psychological abuse. The greatest victory wasn't in beating Derek in competition. It was in proving that genuine strategic thinking, collaborative leadership, and authentic innovation would always triumph over stolen ideas and manipulative tactics in situations where real performance mattered. As I looked out at the Austin skyline from my executive office, I realized that Derek Thompson had actually done me a favor, though he could never have intended it that way. His cruel assessment of my potential had motivated me to develop capabilities that exceeded even my own expectations. His attempt to eliminate a perceived threat had created an adversary whose success ultimately exposed the weakness of his own approach. The person who had once told me I would never amount to anything was now working for a smaller agency in a different city, while I was leading marketing strategy for a portfolio of companies worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The reversal was complete, and it had happened exactly as it should, through demonstrated competence, ethical leadership, and the patient development of genuine expertise that could withstand any competitive challenge. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.